Officer found a tortured German shepherd in the snow. What happened next broke everyone's hearts. The snow came down like knives, slicing sideways across the ridgeline as Officer Eli Turner eased his patrol SUV around the bend. The high beams cut through the blizzard in trembling columns, barely illuminating the pine-studded slope. He adjusted the defroster vents, trying to clear the growing fog on the inside of the windshield, but the heater had given up an hour ago. Outside, it was Montana winter at its worst, fierce, relentless, and merciless to anything left behind. His shift was nearly over, just one last pass along the Pine Hollow stretch before heading back into town. It was supposed to be routine, but tonight carried a weight he couldn't explain. A wrong kind of silence, not the peaceful hush of snowfall, the kind that wrapped itself around something hidden. He almost didn't see it. A flicker of movement on the shoulder. Not big, just a shift in the snow. Eli slowed, tires crunching over packed ice. The SUV groaned as it came to a crawl. He leaned forward, squinting past the windshield glare. There, just off the road, in a small clearing veiled by drifts, something dark broke the smooth white. A shape. No, a body. Eli threw the vehicle into park and stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a fist. His boots sank deep as he pushed through, flashlight cutting erratically through the falling snow. When the beam landed on it, his breath caught. A dog, a German shepherd. Its limbs splayed unnaturally, stretched out and tied to 4 iron stakes driven into the frozen ground. Blood matted its fur. Black and russet turned a sickening dark crimson. The dog was breathing, barely. Shallow, rasping. One eye half closed, the other glassy, unfocused. But when the beam of light swept across its face, the dog tried, just barely, to lift its head. Eli dropped to his knees, snow soaking through his pants in seconds. Hey, easy now. I got you," he said, voice low and steady, the way he used to talk to crash victims who were clinging on the edge. His gloved hands fumbled for the multi-tool at his belt. The ropes had cut deep, leaving angry, raw welts. He saw bruises, burns, lash marks. This wasn't an accident. This was systematic. Each cut through the bindings felt like a small rescue from hell. "You're not dying out here," Eli muttered. "Not like this. Not tonight." The final rope snapped. The shepherd collapsed sideways. Eli caught him just before he hit the snow. The dog whimpered, more from instinct than strength. Eli wrapped his arms around the trembling body, pulling the emergency blanket from his pack. He barely heard the engine at first. Then headlights flared behind the curtain of snow. A black SUV rolled up from below the ridge. No headlights until it was nearly upon them. Eli turned, blinking into the brightness. The SUV slowed. No license plate. The driver's window remained up, but the silhouette inside turned. Even, through the snowfall and glass, Eli felt the stare. Cold. Calculating. The kind of look that didn't ask questions. It knew. Then the SUV moved on, tires whispering across the icy road, vanishing around the bend uphill, towards the very place where the dog had been left to die. Eli stood frozen, blanket clutched tight around the shepherd in his arms. The dog stirred, letting out a low, raw sound, half growl, half cry. Eli looked down. "You saw it too, didn't you?" The dog blinked. Just once. He staggered back to the patrol vehicle, cradling the weight like a wounded soldier. The shepherd didn't struggle. He just trembled. Not from fear. From the body remembering how to stay alive. Eli opened the back door and laid the dog gently across the seat, tucking the blanket tight. He turned the heater up full blast and slammed the door. The black SUV was gone, swallowed by the storm. But that look stayed with him. Whoever was driving knew what he found, knew what they left. and they hadn't tried to stop him. That's what scared Eli the most, because this wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't a random act of cruelty. This was careful, cold, calculated. He pulled onto the road and headed toward Ridgeview, eyes flicking between the windshield and the rearview mirror where the shepherd lay bundled. Every few seconds, the dog's ribs shuddered. But he was breathing. He was still here. Eli didn't have answers. Not yet. But he knew one thing with the certainty of snow under his boots and the cold sweat running down his spine. That German shepherd hadn't been left to die. He'd been left to send a message. And tonight, that message was headed back to town with Eli Turner. The wind hadn't let up. By the time Eli pulled into the gravel lot behind Ridgeview Animal Clinic, the SUV was caked with ice, and his fingertips ached from the cold, even through his gloves. The German shepherd, still wrapped in the wool blanket, lay motionless in the back seat. But he was breathing. Shallow, rattling breaths, but alive. Eli parked right at the side entrance and ran, the dog cradled tight in his arms. His boots slipped once on the ice, but he didn't fall. He wasn't letting go. He pounded on the glass door with his elbow. Inside, fluorescent lights flicked on, and moments later a figure appeared. A woman in grey scrubs and a thick cardigan, auburn hair hastily pulled back, glasses sliding down her nose. She squinted into the night, then gasped. "Eli," she said, unlocking the door. "What the hell? No time!" He cut in, breath clouding the air. "He's dying." Dr. Sarah Lynn stepped back fast. "Bring him in. Table's prepped." The warmth inside hit like a wave, but Eli barely felt it. He laid the shepherd onto the stainless steel table. Blood soaked the edges of the blanket. Sarah's expression changed from shock to focus in the space of a breath. She snapped on gloves and moved with calm, practiced hands. "Name?" she asked, already checking vitals. "He doesn't have one." Eli hesitated. "I've been calling him Shadow." Sarah didn't look up. "Shadow works." She began to cut away matted fur, revealing angry welts, bruises, and lacerations. Some were days old, some were new. She cleaned what she could quickly, muttering under her breath as she worked. Ribs bruised, possibly fractured. Multiple contusions, lacerations along the flanks. These look like... She paused, eyes narrowing. "These aren't bite wounds. These are from a belt or a whip." Eli felt his jaw tighten. He stepped back, hands fisting. "Someone staked him down," he said. 4 iron rods, like a sacrifice. He couldn't move. He was just... waiting. Sarah glanced up, her voice low and steady. "This isn't just abuse. This was deliberate, systematic." She moved to the dog's rear leg and froze. Her gloved fingers pressed gently against a raised spot beneath the skin. "Hold on," she said. "There's something here." Eli leaned in. "A growth." "No, too even, too clean. It's metallic." Sarah reached for a scalpel. "Wait, you're cutting it out now?" "If it's what I think it is, yes." She made a small, clean incision. Blood welled, but she was precise. Within seconds, she tweezed out a thin sliver of metal about the size of a nickel, slick with blood. She placed it onto a steel tray. The overhead light gleamed off its surface, etched with faint lines and numbers. Eli stared at it. "That's not a microchip," he said. "No, that's not anything I've ever seen in veterinary work." Sarah turned to grab a magnifier. "I've read about tech like this, military grade possibly, but not standard pet ID." Eli's stomach turned. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts until he found a name he hadn't dialed in over a year. Noah Reed, a former Army tech specialist turned civilian contractor. Quiet, brilliant, slightly odd in all the ways Eli liked. They'd gone through basic together, But Noah had taken a different path after discharge, into a world of encryption, chips, and tech Eli never pretended to understand. He hit call. It rang once. "Eli?" Noah's voice came through, scratchy with sleep. "What time is it?" "Late. Sorry, I need a favor." A pause. "Someone dead?" "No, but close. I found a dog in the mountains, tied down, nearly frozen. He had something implanted in his leg. I'm looking at it now." Another pause. Then Noah's tone sharpened. "Describe it." Eli did, while Sarah held it under the light. "Take a clear photo and send it to me. High res. Both sides." Eli snapped the shots, sent them, then waited as silence filled the room. Shadow whimpered once, barely a sound, but Sarah rested a hand on his shoulder, whispering something soft. He settled again. A beep. Message received. Noah called back 30 seconds later. "That's not a chip," he said. "Not like you. Think. That's a suppression node." "A what?" "Pain override. It interrupts the nervous system, blocks discomfort, maybe even motor response. It's not civilian tech, Eli. Someone was trying to turn this dog into a machine." Eli's throat dried. "Why?" "I won't guess without seeing the firmware. But if this is what I think it is, it's more than just one case. It's part of a system." Sarah had gone still. She was listening now, too. Noah continued. "I'll try to extract the data without tripping the failsafes. But Eli, if someone implanted that in a dog, they didn't want him rescued. And if they know you have it, they'll come looking." Eli ended the call and looked back at Shadow. The dog's eyes had opened. Not wide, but alert. Watching. "I don't think they expected him to survive," Sarah said quietly. "But he did. And now they'll know." Eli nodded once. "Then we'll be ready." He stepped beside Shadow, resting a hand gently on the dog's neck. The shepherd flinched slightly, then stilled under the weight of the touch. "You made it out of hell," Eli whispered. "Now let's find out who put you there." The bell above the clinic's front door chimed softly, too delicate for the cold that swept in behind it. Eli looked up from his spot by the corner coffee table, where he'd been sipping what passed for coffee and listening to the slow rhythm of Shadow's breathing. The dog lay curled in a padded cot near the back, ivy line taped gently to one leg, his eyes closed, but ears occasionally twitching to unfamiliar sounds. The man who stepped inside didn't match the place. Not even close. He wore a tailored black coat that reached just above his knees, its collar turned up against the cold. Black leather gloves. Slacks, too, pressed for Montana. His boots didn't crunch or scuff. They landed like punctuation. His hair was dark, peppered slightly with grey, combed so precisely it looked unnatural. His face was sharp, skin pale like paper, cheekbones clean and high, eyes the color of dry steel. Not the kind of face you forgot, not the kind of man who wandered into a small-town animal clinic by accident. "Good afternoon," the man said. His voice was low and smooth, the kind that was designed to settle nerves and control a room. He looked around slowly, as if taking stock, then let his gaze settle on the cot. Eli stood. The man offered a polite nod, not friendly. Measured. "My name is Dorian Vale," he said. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Eli took a step forward. "You'll need to be more specific." "The German shepherd," Dorian said simply. "He's company property. We've been looking for him for several days. He wandered off during transport. Unfortunate mishap." There was no tension in his voice, no concern, just an underlying certainty that the dog would be returned, like a briefcase left at a bus stop. "Is that what you call it?" Erlight asked. "A mishap? Staking him to the ground and leaving him to bleed out in the snow?" Dorian's jaw didn't even twitch. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "I don't think there's anything misunderstood," said another voice from the back. Dr. Sarah Lynn emerged from the hallway, wiping her hands on a towel. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice carried the edge of someone who'd had enough already. "That animal came in with fractured ribs, contusions, deep tissue damage, and a foreign implant. You call that a mishap? I call that premeditated abuse." Dorian turned his gaze toward her, as if just now acknowledging her presence. He gave a courteous half-smile. "I appreciate your concern, Doctor, but I assure you we take excellent care of our assets. This particular animal was part of an advanced behavioral study, privately funded and legally protected. You don't want the kind of attention that comes with interfering in research above your pay grade." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Research? This dog wasn't in a lab. He was in the woods, staked like a damned sacrifice. Whatever you were studying, it doesn't belong here." Eli stepped between them. "He's not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Not until we find out exactly what was done to him, and by who." There was a beat of silence. Then Dorian's smile flattened. "Officer Turner," he said, drawing out the name like a slow card from a loaded deck. "You seem like a decent man. Local. Invested. Maybe even the kind who believes in doing the right thing. But let me offer some advice." Eli didn't move. "The system doesn't like interference," Dorian said softly. He let the sentence hang in the air. Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Is that a threat?" Dorian turned back to her, almost amused. "Not at all. Just a gentle warning. There are processes in place, legal avenues. Our lawyers will be in touch shortly with the appropriate documentation. And when that time comes, I expect your cooperation." Eli didn't blink. "He's not your property. He's a living being who nearly died on my watch. If you think I'm handing him over because someone in a suit tells me to, you don't understand how small towns work." Dorian tilted his head slightly, eyes cold. "Small towns burn just the same, officer." He adjusted his coat, then turned towards the door. Before he stepped out, he paused, just long enough to let his last words linger. "You should ask yourself what else you've stepped into, and how many people are willing to be stepped over." Then he was gone. The bell rang again. The wind followed him out. For a few seconds the clinic was silent. Eli's chest rose and fell with slow, deliberate control. "He'll be back," Sarah said. Eli looked at Shadow. The dog had lifted his head slightly, eyes open, ears perked. "He already is," Eli muttered. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just watched the door, long after it closed, as if he knew that danger didn't always shout. Sometimes it smiled, and sometimes it wore a black coat. The morning sky above Pine Hollow was a pale grey bruise, heavy with the promise of more snow. Eli Turner pulled his SUV onto the shoulder near the same ridge he'd nearly missed Shadow in days ago. The wind hadn't softened. The cold hadn't lifted. If anything, it bit deeper now. But something gnawed harder inside him. He left the engine running, grabbed his sidearm, flashlight, and a small camera, then stepped into the drifts. Shadow was safe back at the clinic, sedated and recovering. Sarah had insisted on rest, but the dog had growled softly when Eli left, not in protest, but in warning. As if he sensed something waiting out here. Eli didn't doubt it. He retraced his path carefully, boots crunching through the snow toward the clearing where he'd found the shepherd. It was just as he remembered, silent, still and wrong. Then something new. Tracks, deep tire treads curving away from the road and up the tree line, mostly covered but fresh enough to make out the pattern. Not snowplow, not recreational. Heavy all-terrain. A vehicle meant for moving quietly where others couldn't. Eli followed them on foot, breathing steady, flashlight sweeping over the low shrubs and spindly trees, their branches bowing under ice. The air was painfully still. That same stillness he'd felt the night he found Shadow. After half an hour of trudging uphill, the trail opened to a flat stretch carved into the mountainside. The building was old. Weathered planks greyed with time, roof partially collapsed, windows boarded. It might have been a ranger depot or a logging outpost long ago, but its recent history was written in the details. Iron bolts still gleaming with oil, discarded tarps stiff with blood, and cages, dozens of them, lined against the inner walls of what had once been a barn. He stepped inside slowly, gun drawn low. The smell hit first, not just mildew and dust, but ammonia, sweat, old fear, and something else, metallic, coppery. Flashlight beam swept across the cages. They weren't kennels. These were containment cells, reinforced doors, claw marks, bite indentations. Some had chains still clipped to the floors. Eli crouched near one. Tufts of fur clung to the bars. A food bowl lay overturned and dry, and on the back wall he spotted black scorch marks where something had burned long ago. As he moved toward the rear of the barn, he found a crude table made from plywood nailed over crates. On top of it, documents, scattered gear, empty vials, and photographs. His stomach turned. Dogs, lined up, chained, some in mid-snarl, some mid-collapse, and then there he was, Shadow, same coat, same eyes. Standing stiffly in front of chain-link fencing, a nylon collar tight around his neck with a white barcode tag dangling beneath it. Unit C-214. Eli picked up the photo with shaking fingers. They catalogued him. Like equipment, he snapped pictures of everything. The photo, the cage rows, the tire tracks outside, the burn marks. He bagged the collar tag and one empty syringe with a metal casing. Just enough to start a file. Not enough to call in the cavalry, but more than enough to prove this wasn't some rogue backyard operation. It was systematic, cold, funded. He stepped back into the snow, phone already in hand to text Noah, when something shifted behind him. A sound. Too clean. Too soft. He spun just as a shape lunged from the trees. The first man slammed into him from the right, sending them both down into the snow. Eli's head cracked against ice. The flashlight flew. A boot connected with his ribs. He gasped, rolled, reached for his pistol, but a second man kicked it away before he could close fingers around the grip. "Should have minded your own road, Turner," the older one hissed. He wore a faded camo jacket, cracked leather gloves, and a grin that held no warmth. The younger man hovered behind him, jittery, knife in hand. Blonde, wiry, eyes darting. "We just want what's in your pocket," the older one said. "And maybe a warning shot to the leg. Keep things quiet." Eli tried to rise, but the first punch knocked him sideways again. Snow filled his collar, his mouth. Then, another sound. A growl. Not far. Low. Guttural. Real. Out of the woods, a streak of black and russet fur hurtled through the trees. Shadow. His legs still stiff. His bandage still fresh, but eyes sharp. Moving like pain had no say. The older man turned just as Shadow lunged. The shepherd didn't bark. He hit like a missile. The man toppled, his scream muffled as Shadow clamped down on his forearm. The younger man raised his knife. But Eli, adrenaline surging, grabbed a fistful of snow and rock and flung it at the attacker's face. The man flinched, stumbled back. Eli rolled, got his hand around his gun, and leveled it. "Drop it!" The young man froze. Knife half raised. "Do it now!" The blade hit the snow. Shadow still held the older man down, teeth sunk deep, not drawing blood, but holding just enough for fear to do the rest. Eli panted, vision blurry, ears ringing. The men didn't fight back again. They backed off fast and sloppy, disappearing into the trees without another word. Eli knelt beside Shadow. The dog was shaking, his ribs labored. Blood speckled his bandage again. But his eyes were blazing. You weren't supposed to be here, Eli whispered. Shadow leaned against him. He hadn't barked once. He'd come without sound, without orders. He had remembered. Eli pressed his forehead briefly to the shepherd's. You saved me again, he said. Let's get the hell out of here. Together, they limped back to the SUV, the snow already starting to fall again. Behind them, the mountain held its secrets, but not forever. And Shadow? Shadow had proven something no file, no implant, no photo could measure. He was more than a unit, more than evidence. He was coming back. And now, they both had a war to fight. Noah Reed's cabin sat deep in the valley, tucked between rows of pine and frost. It was one of those places built for a man who wanted quiet, too much quiet. The kind of place where light stayed low and the hum of machinery filled the silence. Eli pulled in just after dusk, Shadow in the passenger seat, resting his head on the door panel. The shepherd's wounds were sealed, but his ribs still rose with a tremor. Every so often his ears twitched towards the woods, as if listening for something Eli couldn't hear. Inside, Noah greeted them with a wary grin and a mug of black coffee that smelled like it could melt rust. He hadn't changed much, same wiry frame, same restless eyes. But there was tension under the surface tonight. I didn't think you'd actually find one, Noah said, shutting the cabin door behind them. I've only seen blueprints, never thought they made it past prototypes. Eli handed him a small evidence bag containing the metallic chip. That came out of his leg. Sarah found it. Noah took the bag like it was radioactive. He held it under the lamplight, squinting. You sure this dog wasn't part of a research unit? He's got scars that don't look like science, Eli said. And 2 guys nearly killed me yesterday trying to take the evidence back. That got Noah's attention. He placed the chip on a velvet pad and moved to his workstation. 3 monitors, a half-dismantled laptop, and enough tangled wires to power a small satellite. Let's see what the hell we're dealing with. Shadow lifted his head, watching Noah with steady eyes. Eli crouched beside him, resting a hand gently on the dog's neck. You good? Shadow exhaled sharply through his nose. He wasn't relaxed, but he wasn't afraid either. Noah started working, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Whoever designed this didn't want it traced. Encryption's military grade, beyond anything commercial. But they got sloppy. Eli frowned. Sloppy? Everyone gets cocky when they think they're untouchable. The first screen flickered, flooding with green code. Noah leaned closer. Here we go. A schematic appeared, neural lines, circuits, and pulse maps of a canine body. The tag read, C Project Nexus. Noah's voice dropped. It's not just a tracker. It's a neural override. Pain suppression, reflex inhibition, even behavioral redirection. In simple terms, this thing hijacks instinct. Eli felt the words sink like ice. You're saying it controls them. Not just control, Noah said. It rewires loyalty, forces obedience past pain thresholds. Whoever ran this was building something they couldn't stop manually. It's coded to trigger externally, probably by radio or pulse signal. He typed another command. A log unfolded on screen. Timestamps, locations, signal IDs. Eli stepped closer. Those look like GPS markers. Exactly, Noah said. And not just one, dozens, different states, different handlers, multiple dogs. An entire network, Noah confirmed quietly. These weren't pets, they were assets, trained, implanted, and distributed. Eli's stomach twisted. And it's still active? Noah nodded slowly. There's data from 48 hours ago. Someone ran a full system check. Eli stared at the screen, the quiet hum of the cabin growing heavier by the second. He glanced at Shadow. The dog had shifted forward, eyes fixed on the monitor, body tense. His breathing changed, steady, focused, almost like recognition. "Noah," Eli said softly. "Can they still reach him? Through that thing?" "Not if I strip the residual code." Noah's voice carried no comfort. "But if someone knows he's alive, they'll come for him again. They'll want the chip. Or worse, they'll want to erase him." A low growl rumbled from Shadow's chest. Eli felt it before he heard it. "He knows," Noah murmured. "He can sense it." Eli crouched and looked into the shepherd's eyes. There was something burning behind them. Not fear, but memory. The kind of memory that scars muscle and bone. "You're free now," Eli said quietly. "No one's touching you again." The monitors pinged softly. Noah turned back to the data, jaw tightening. "I think I've got a lead," he said. "The system was last accessed through a satellite uplink near a storage complex outside Helena. That's where the control signals originate." Eli exhaled. "Helena's 2 hours from here." "Then we have 2 hours to decide how far you want to go down this rabbit hole." Noah replied, "Because this isn't just about dogs, Eli. This is about people who saw loyalty as a design flaw and fixed it." Eli didn't respond right away. His gaze drifted back to Shadow, who was now sitting upright, staring through the cabin window into the dark beyond. Snow had begun to fall again, soft at first, then thicker, coating the pines in silence. Noah shut down the main feed and slid the chip back into the evidence bag. "You brought me something alive, Eli, but whatever's behind this, they're not done yet. You just interrupted their operation. That makes you both targets." Eli looked up, then let them come. Shadow turned his head slightly, meeting his eyes. It wasn't obedience that shone there. It was choice. The kind that comes from something deeper than programming, something human in the way only a loyal dog can be. Outside, the wind picked up. The mountains listened. Somewhere out there, other dogs still wore the same scars, the same numbers burned into their collars. And for the first time since the night in the storm, Eli realized this wasn't just about saving one of them. It was about freeing all of them. The snow had stopped falling, but the cold still pressed in like a second skin. Ridgeview's sheriff's office sat at the end of Main Street, its old brick facade sagging under the weight of another hard winter. The sign above the door hadn't been repainted in a decade. The star etched in the glass was dulled by time and frost. Eli stepped inside with Shadow at his heel. The shepherd walked close, but unaided, his gait stiff but steady. His wounds were healing. His eyes no longer just observed, they scanned. Sheriff Lyle Graves looked up from a stack of paperwork, a pair of reading glasses sliding low on his nose. His desk was cluttered, a half-eaten cinnamon roll balanced on a file. He was in his early 60s, thick in the middle, white hair cropped short. His uniform looked like it had seen 100 winters. Graves didn't smile. He rarely did. "Turner," he said, setting his pen down. "And you're +1. Shadow sat quietly by the door, unmoving, his gaze locked on the sheriff like he was studying more than a man, like he could read something in the quiet tilt of his chin or the pause before each word. "I need 10 minutes, Eli said, pulling a flash drive from his coat pocket. "Maybe more." Graves sighed. "If it's about that dog again, I heard enough rumors already. What, now he's a war hero?" Eli stepped forward, placing the drive on the desk. "No, but he survived something that would have killed most, and what did it to him isn't a rumor." Graves raised an eyebrow, then gave a slow nod toward the chair across from him. Eli sat. "I've got photos, video, evidence, from a site up near Pine Hollow, an abandoned depot outfitted with cages, chains, training gear. The dog, Shadow, he was part of something organized. It wasn't some freak incident." Graves leaned back, skeptical. You want me to believe a rogue training camp's been operating in my county without a single blip on my radar? Eli opened a folder and laid out printed stills. The cages, the map, the photograph of Shadow with a barcode tag around his neck. Then he pulled the sealed evidence bag from his coat pocket. The chip. Graves picked it up reluctantly, holding it like it might bite. "That's not a tracker," Eli said. "It's a neurological override. It hijacks pain responses and suppresses instinct. Built to force compliance. Noah Reed cracked the encryption. There's a whole network tied to this. Dozens of dogs. Multiple states." Graves stared at the chip for a long beat. Then he set it down gently, folded his hands, and sighed. "You realize what you're asking me to do? This isn't a local matter anymore. If what you're saying is real, it's federal. It's surveillance. It's black budget projects I don't want my name near." Eli didn't blink. "So you'd rather bury it?" Graves' jaw tightened. "I'd rather not see my department swallowed whole because one of my deputies kicked the hornet's nest." Shadow stood. Not barked. Just stood. Graves looked at him. Met those eyes, and something shifted. A flicker of discomfort? No. Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. Eli didn't move. "You ever see a dog like him, Lyle? A dog torn apart, left to die, who still fought to protect someone after?" The sheriff didn't answer. Eli continued. "He's not the only one, and if you let this go, the next one doesn't make it out. Or worse, they make it through, and someone turns them on the next small town down the road." Graves reached for the flash drive, plugged it into his aging desktop. The screen lit up with Noah's decrypted files, GPS data, ID logs, handler codes, cross-state activity, unregistered facilities, and then the overlays, maps with Ridgeview sitting smack in the center of one marked route. "How long do we have before this spreads further?" he asked, voice lower now. "It already has." Eli said, "We're just late to notice." For a long moment, Graves sat without speaking. Then he rubbed his face and muttered, "Damn it, Turner." He stood, walked to the office door, and locked it. "We build a case, something airtight. Reports, logs, physical evidence. We start documenting everything. If we go to the feds, we go with more than words?" Eli nodded. Agreed. Graves gestured at Shadow. "And him?" Eli looked down. The dog met his gaze. There was no need for commands. Shadow walked forward, slow but proud, and laid down beside the sheriff's desk like he'd always belonged there. Graves gave a thin smile. "Hell of a witness." Eli picked up a pen and a blank form. "No, not a witness," he wrote. "Partner, Shadow. K9 status, pending active. Handler, Eli Turner." Outside, snow began falling again. But inside that quiet office, the truth had finally found traction. And Shadow? He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was the reason the system would be forced to look in the mirror. The road was washed out 2 miles from the last marker. Eli cut the engine, grabbed his pack, and followed Shadow into the brush. It was close to midnight. The sky was thick with low clouds, hiding even the moonlight. But Shadow didn't hesitate. His body lowered as they moved, every step deliberate, nose flicking through the damp air. They'd been tracking a scent for the past 2 hours, chemical residue mixed with blood and something synthetic. Not death, not rot, but engineered obedience. Ahead, the trees opened to a gravel lot, barely lit by a single overhead lamp. The warehouse sat like a sleeping beast, rectangular and unmarked, its tin walls weathered by time, but humming faintly with electricity. Shadow froze at the tree line, his ears flattened. A low vibration rumbled from his throat, not a growl but something older, an instinct pulsing beneath the surface. Eli crouched beside him. "You sure this is it?" Shadow didn't move. His body pointed like a compass. Yes, they crossed the field in silence, slipping through a broken panel near the rear loading dock. Inside, the air turned thick, with ammonia, bleach, and fear. Rows of cages stretched wall to wall, each one holding a dog. Dozens of them, muzzles strapped tight, IV lines snaking out of metal ports drilled into their necks. Eyes that no longer blinked naturally. Some lay still, others trembled, and a few, God help them, growled not at strangers but at nothing at all. Shadow stepped forward and stopped at a cage. The shepherd inside looked nearly identical to him, same sable coat, same deep eyes. But this one was trembling violently, a chip pulsed blue under the skin on its neck. Shadow licked the bars. Eli began recording. Photos, footage, GPS tags. He pulled out the chip reader and scanned the first dog. A code lit up. TXD4721, same signature encryption. This wasn't just a holding site, it was a conversion chamber. That's when the overhead lights snapped on. Eli spun around, flashlight gripped like a weapon. A voice echoed from the catwalk above. "Well, you found it faster than I thought." Dorian, flanked by two mercs in black tactical gear, rifles slung low, not aiming yet. One of them had a scar running down his cheek, fresh. The other was younger, more uncertain, eyes darting towards the dogs. "You've been busy," Eli said, keeping his voice even. Dorian stepped down the steel stairs, slow and deliberate. "You could have walked away. You had the dog, could have disappeared. But no, you brought him back here." Shadow's body coiled beside Eli, not barking, watching. Dorian reached into his coat and held up a tablet. A video played on its screen. Shadow, in the cage, months ago. Screaming, thrashing. A man in surgical gloves adjusting the chip as the shepherd convulsed. They'd kept the footage. "You see, this wasn't cruelty. It was progress," Dorian said. "You call it torture. We called it training. Until that one." He nodded at Shadow. Bit through his own restraints. First of his batch to reject full control. He snapped his fingers. Rifles raised. "Kill him. And the dog." Before Eli could react, Shadow was already moving. Not at Dorian. At the younger merc. He didn't leap. He pushed off the ground low and hard, crashing into the man's legs. The rifle skidded. The merc screamed as Shadow clamped onto his forearm, not to maim, but to disarm. The man twisted, tried to punch, but Shadow yanked down and away, knocking him into a crate. Shots rang out. Eli ducked and rolled, pulling his sidearm, returning fire. The older merc took cover behind a column and shouted, "We were told this was storage, not active." Dorian snarled, "You idiot! He is the active file!" But something cracked in the younger merc's eyes. As Shadow stood between him and the gun, not biting, not retreating, just staring. There was no fear in the shepherd, only refusal. The man saw it, and dropped his weapon. Dorian raised his pistol. Eli fired first. The bullet tore through Dorian's shoulder, sending him spinning. He collapsed against the steel pillar, blood blooming fast. The remaining merc fled through the emergency door. Sirens could be heard in the distance. Graves had followed protocol. Backup was coming. Eli rushed to Shadow. The dog's fur was damp with blood, but it wasn't his. He nudged the younger merc towards the cages. "Unlock them." The man hesitated, then nodded. Shadow stayed beside Eli as the locks clicked open one by one. Some of the dogs didn't move. Others, dazed, stumbled forward, blinking like they'd been born moments ago. One, a chocolate lab with cloudy eyes, nudged Eli's hand, then leaned into him. "You did that," Eli said softly, looking at Shadow. Shadow didn't wag his tail. He stood tall among the broken. A sentinel. A survivor. The warehouse wasn't silent anymore. It echoed with the sounds of cages opening. And somewhere deep in that chorus of soft steps and fragile hope, a war dog walked freely for the first time, not just for himself, but for every one of them. They moved fast after the warehouse raid. Shadow had barely rested when the black SUVs rolled into the county line the next morning, tires crackling against the gravel like thunder under pressure. Sheriff Graves stood beside Eli at the station steps, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind his weathered sunglasses. He didn't speak until the lead agent approached. "You're sure about the file?" the agent asked, flipping through a worn folder labeled Classified. Eli nodded, hand resting gently on Shadow's collar. "We've got the chips, the footage, names, dates, lab coordinates. It's not just dogfighting, it's bioenhancement trafficking, behavioral rewiring, experimental obedience programs across state lines." The agent gave a single nod. That was enough. By sunset, the arrests had begun. Across 5 counties, black sites disguised as boarding kennels and behavioral training centers were being stormed. Files were seized, servers wiped clean for evidence extraction. And always, behind the locked doors, they found more dogs. Many didn't survive, but the ones who did, emaciated, trembling, injected with the same nanotech tracking chips, now looked to the world with a fractured but not broken gaze. And each one seemed to recognize Shadow as something more than a fellow survivor. He was the one who got out, the one who came back. Meanwhile, Dorian ran. It took 3 days of false leads and 1 broken ankle in a swamp ditch before the FBI's thermal drone picked up movement inside a storage yard outside Pensacola. He was preparing another shipment. 6 dogs, unconscious, stacked inside steel cages like spare parts. When the agents moved in, he reached for a detonator hidden in the lining of a toolbox. He didn't get the chance. Shadow was already in the yard. He lunged before they could give the signal, jaws clamping down, not on flesh, but on the man's wrist. Controlled. Precision. Just enough to disarm. Just enough to drag him to the dirt. When Dorian screamed, Shadow let go, then stepped back, eyes never leaving his face. "You should have stayed buried," Eli said, coming in behind the agents. Dorian spat blood. "You don't get it. We were building something bigger than loyalty. We were creating control." Eli looked at the cages. "You didn't build anything. You broke it. You broke them." Dorian was cuffed and hauled into the transport van. Later that week, federal prosecutors filed charges under 4 jurisdictions: human experimentation, animal cruelty, weapons development without federal clearance, conspiracy, kidnapping, trafficking. The list kept growing. But something unexpected happened. In court, as the agents outlined their case and the jury took their seats, Eli was asked a question he hadn't anticipated. "Will Shadow be present for testimony?" There was a pause, then a motion, then a quiet agreement. Because Shadow wasn't just evidence anymore. He was a witness. And when they brought him in, wearing his service vest, walking with calm precision down the polished courtroom floor, no one made a sound. Not even Dorian. Shadow took his place beside Eli. A deputy laid a small mat near the witness stand. Shadow didn't sit. He stood, watching every face, his ears twitching slightly as names were read, evidence presented, timelines shown. When they played the footage, the one from the warehouse, the others from the training sites, Shadow's tail didn't flick. But when the video showed the moment he broke through the restraints, the courtroom shifted. Not out of fear, but awe. The judge asked for silence. But it had already fallen. During recess, one of the assistant DAs leaned toward Eli and whispered, "I've never seen a courtroom quiet like that for a living thing without a voice." Eli smiled faintly. "He has one. You just have to know how to listen." By the end of the week, the entire network had unraveled. Dozens of names, offshore accounts, military contractors pretending to be veterinary research groups. And deep in the digital traces, a new name surfaced. One even Dorian had feared. A private lab overseas with ties to experimental mind control programs. That chapter hadn't closed yet, but this one had. Back at the cabin, the old porch was reinforced. A new ramp built for the dogs now under rehab care. Shadow didn't leave Eli's side much, but at dusk he often walked to the tree line, stood watch, and listened. Not for threats, for peace. And in that silence, Eli realized something. Shadow didn't just return to finish a mission. He came back to make sure no other dog had to suffer in silence again. The warehouse was gone. But the legacy of what happened there echoed in courtrooms, newsrooms, and across every kennel that once held something it was never meant to cage. Loyalty, brutalized, but unbroken. And a shepherd who reminded the world that silence doesn't mean surrender. It just means you're waiting for the right moment to bite back. The quiet came first. No more coded messages. No more encrypted drives tucked into dog collars. No more late-night tracking through pine-thick woods with nothing but breath and instinct. For the first time in years, Shadow slept without twitching in his dreams. Eli noticed it that first morning back at the cabin. Shadow didn't bolt upright at the sound of a branch cracking outside. He just opened one eye, huffed softly, then went back to sleep. That was the moment Eli decided. At the sheriff's office later that day, he handed over the final set of adoption papers. Sheriff Graves didn't even blink. "Thought you already had." "I did," Eli said. "Now it's on record." That night, the two of them sat on the porch. The stars over the pines blinked steady and calm. Shadow lay beside him, head resting on Eli's boot, ears half up, alert but relaxed. "You're home now," Eli said quietly. Shadow didn't respond. He didn't have to. Back in town, Dorian was behind bars, denied bail. The courtroom hearings were scheduled to begin in less than 2 months. His face had made it to national headlines, the former behavioral scientist turned black market innovator. But something about his sudden calm after capture had always felt off to Eli. It didn't take long for the crack to appear. 2 weeks after the arrest, the U.S. Marshals moved one of Dorian's former enforcers, a man named Jace Moretti, to a federal safehouse under heavy guard. The man had vanished after the warehouse raid. Everyone assumed he'd fled the country. Turns out he hadn't. He'd gone to ground. And now he wanted to talk. The FBI didn't trust him. Graves didn't either. But Eli had a different angle. He brought Shadow. They met in a side building of a remote detention center outside Asheville. 1 glass wall, 1 steel door, 1 witness. Jace, wearing a plain gray jumpsuit, flinched the moment Shadow walked in. Eli noticed. He let Shadow move forward slowly, without command. The dog stopped exactly 4 feet from the glass and stared. "Why's he here?" Jace muttered. "You tell me," Eli said, crossing his arms. "You're the one who used to train with them." Jace hesitated, then leaned forward, voice low. "He's not supposed to be like that. Not this calm, not after what they did to him." Eli said nothing. Jace cracked. "He was in the beta program." He continued. "Cognitive override conditioning. Pain paired with location triggers. That dog should be attacking every time he hears a chain-link gate open, or the click of a camera lens. But he's not, because he chose not to." Eli said, "And you're going to help us stop it from ever happening again." Jace blinked, then nodded. Over the next 3 hours, names spilled out. Satellite facilities in Kentucky, another hidden kennel near Odessa, Texas, a converted vet clinic in Oregon. Each place had a function: breeding, testing, tech transfer. Each one was networked into what Dorian had, built like nodes in a dark web lattice. What they uncovered wasn't just national, it crossed borders, black budgets, military interest, unregulated partnerships. Dorian was just one head of a hydra, Jace admitted. He wanted control through obedience, but someone higher up wanted silence through fear. Eli left the interview shaken. Shadow didn't make a sound the entire ride home. But when they reached the ridge above the cabin and the truck door opened, Shadow leapt down, nose lifted to the wind, tail twitching with focused energy. He was ready again. Only now, the mission wasn't vengeance. It was protection. Eli began retraining him for joint patrols. Graves approved. The two became a fixture around the county. Forest trails, park perimeters, school events, not as warning, but as presence. People started to notice. At first they just waved, then they started asking questions, not just about Shadow's training, but about what had really happened in that burned-out warehouse north of town. Eli never told the full story, but when a local journalist asked him if Shadow was a rescue, he simply said, "No, he's the one who did the rescuing." One afternoon, after a school demo, a boy no older than 8 approached quietly, holding out a drawing. It was Shadow, standing tall, one paw lifted, his eyes glowing gold. The words at the top read, "The dog who found the truth." Eli didn't frame it. He tacked it to the back wall of the cabin with a single nail. That night, Shadow curled up beneath it. Outside, the wind stirred softly through the trees. Healing didn't come with fanfare. It came with space, with patience, with a dog choosing to sit by your side, not because he was told, but because he wanted to, because he trusted you again, and because somewhere out there, more was still waiting to be found. A full year had passed since the last siren, the last coded call, the last time Eli stood in front of a burning building with his hand on Shadow's collar, heart pounding with purpose. Now the quiet had a different weight to it. The cabin hadn't changed much, still wood-framed and slightly crooked at the porch. But the air felt lighter. Maybe it was the way the wind moved through the pines now, unhurried, unafraid. Or maybe it was just that Shadow was still here, alive, aging, but unmistakably alert. Eli sat on the steps, boots resting on the second plank. A chipped mug of black coffee cooled in his hands. Shadow lay at his feet, one ear perked, eyes half closed, his breathing slow and steady. He wasn't guarding out of duty anymore. He was guarding because he chose to. The trail leading to the cabin rustled faintly. Not from deer or wind this time, but sneakers crunching the gravel with hesitant steps. A young woman appeared at the edge of the clearing, holding a worn notebook and a phone still in record mode. Her university lanyard fluttered in the breeze. She looked out of place among the trees, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Eli Maddox?" Eli looked up but didn't answer. She cleared her throat. "I'm writing a piece for our journalism department. About the old case. The one with the burned warehouse. The one they say exposed a network that stretched across 5 states. Her eyes flicked toward Shadow. "The one your dog helped crack wide open." Still no response. She tried again. "They say you and Shadow—" "I know what they say," Eli said quietly. A pause. Then she nodded, backing off the pressure. "Can I ask just one question?" Eli finally met her gaze. "Why stay here?" she asked. "Why live in silence after all that noise?" For a long beat, the only sound was wind moving across the trees. Then Shadow lifted his head. Not fast, not tense, just aware. Eli didn't answer with words. He simply turned and pointed towards the front gate, where a handmade wooden sign hung, weathered but proud. It read, "He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth." The reporter followed the line of his hand, and for a moment she didn't speak. She scribbled something in her notebook, nodded her thanks, and slowly made her way back down the trail. As her footsteps faded, Shadow eased back down and rested his chin across Eli's boot. The truth was, Eli had thought about leaving. He'd gotten offers, consulting, security, even a book deal. But none of it felt right. He wasn't built for spotlights. And Shadow had never needed applause, only purpose. They stayed because the town was still healing, because silence needed witnesses, because every now and then a kid from the school would bike past the gate, slow down, and whisper to his friend, "That's the dog who found the truth." And that was enough. Sometimes, in the early hours before dawn, Eli would wake to find Shadow already sitting at the window, watching the woods. Not restless, not anxious, just watching. Because danger didn't always come with warning signs, and some guardians never clock out. Shadow wasn't just a survivor of what Dorian's network had done. He was the reason it unraveled. He was the heartbeat behind every locked door that was opened, every hidden kennel that was shut down, every dog that didn't have to suffer in silence again. He wasn't trained for vengeance. He was born for justice. And though the fire had gone from his stride, though grey now peppered his snout, Shadow still watched every passing car with a soldier's discipline, still listened for the shift in wind that others missed, still slept with one eye ready, not for the past, for what could still come, because some wounds don't heal in silence, and some truths only come to light when someone dares to bark for them. So the cabin remained. The gate stayed open. The trail remained walked. And two souls, one quiet man, one quiet dog, stood ready for whatever else the world thought it could hide. Now it was your turn. What's your story with a loyal pet? If you believe some guardians still watch, even in silence, subscribe to our channel, share this story, and honor the ones who bark not for food, but for truth. Support the mission, support the memory, support the German Shepherd who never stopped guarding.